When Marcus Sterling threw money at the waitress and demanded she speak Chinese to humiliate her, the entire restaurant went silent. They expected her to fail. They expected her to cry. What they got instead? A lesson they would never forget. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes life doesn't just knock you down. It completely shatters everything you thought you were. And that's exactly what happened to Maya Chin. Picture this: London, one of the busiest cities in the world. Maya was 28 years old, and just 3 years ago, her life looked completely different. She wasn't always wearing that black waitress uniform, carrying expensive champagne to people who wouldn't even look her in the eye. No, 3 years ago, Dr. Maya Chin was someone people actually respected. She had a PhD in languages from Cambridge University. Can you imagine? She spoke 8 languages fluently: Mandarin, Spanish, French, Arabic, and more. She was a professor, standing in front of lecture halls full of students who hung on to her every word. She traveled the world, giving talks at international conferences. She had published books. She had made it. But then everything changed with one phone call in the middle of the night. Your mother has had a massive heart attack. You need to come now. Maya's world stopped spinning that night. Her mother, Susan, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise Maya alone, who had worked 3 jobs so Maya could go to university, was fighting for her life in intensive care. The doctors said she needed surgery. Expensive surgery. Then more surgery. Then rehabilitation. Then constant care. The medical bills started small, but they grew and grew like a monster that wouldn't stop eating. £50,000. Then 100,000. Then 200,000. Maya sold everything. Her flat in central London? Gone. Her car? Sold. Her jewelry, her furniture, her precious collection of books from around the world? All of it gone. She took a leave from the university, thinking she'd go back in a few months. But months turned into a year. The bills kept coming. The university gave her position to someone else. When her mother finally came home from the hospital, she was different. She needed someone with her all the time. She couldn't walk properly. She couldn't remember things. Maya couldn't leave her alone, couldn't go back to teaching, couldn't do anything except try to survive. The medical debt reached nearly £500,000. Maya had to declare bankruptcy. Her colleagues stopped calling. Her so-called friends disappeared like smoke. Suddenly, the brilliant Dr. Maya Chin was invisible. So there she was, working at the Crown Room, the most expensive restaurant in London, where a single bottle of wine cost more than she made in a week. She worked the night shift, serving the rich and powerful. During the day, she worked at a care home, helping elderly people, just to make enough money for her mother's medications. She slept maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. Every penny went to keeping her mother alive, to paying for physical therapy, to buying food, to paying rent on the tiny flat they shared with 2 other people in a rough part of town. But Maya never complained. She held her head high, because she knew something that most people didn't understand. Your circumstances don't define your worth. Just because life had knocked her down didn't mean she was less intelligent, less capable, or less valuable. Still, it hurt. Every single day it hurt. Especially when people looked at her like she was nothing. When they snapped their fingers at her. When they didn't say please or thank you. When they talked about her like she wasn't even human. The worst was when they made assumptions. They looked at this Asian woman in a waitress uniform and decided they knew everything about her. They decided she was uneducated. They decided she was poor because she was stupid. They decided she deserved to be where she was. And that's where our story really begins, on a cold Tuesday night in November, when Maya was about to meet someone who would try to break her spirit completely, never realizing that some spirits are too strong to break. The Crown Room was packed that evening. All of London's elite were there: bankers, investors, celebrities, politicians. The crystal chandeliers sparkled. Classical music played softly in the background. Everything was perfect, elegant, expensive. Maya moved between tables with practiced grace, her tray balanced perfectly, her smile polite but distant. She had learned not to make eye contact too much. Rich people didn't like it when the help looked at them too directly. But that night, she couldn't avoid the man at table 7. His name was Marcus Sterling, and everyone knew who he was. A property developer worth millions, he owned half the buildings in central London. He was 50 years old, with silver hair and a permanent tan that came from spending winters in the Caribbean. And he was loud. So loud that half the restaurant could hear him showing off to the 3 Chinese businessmen sitting at his table. These men were considering investing £200 million in Marcus's new development project. He was trying very hard to impress them. When Maya approached to take their order, Marcus barely glanced at her. But then something caught his attention. The Chinese investors were speaking Mandarin to each other, and Marcus clearly couldn't understand them. He didn't like feeling left out. That's when he got an idea. A cruel idea. The kind of idea that small men have when they want to feel big. And Maya, standing there with her notepad and her tired eyes and her dignity still intact despite everything life had thrown at her, had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even when it feels like the worst place in the world. Marcus Sterling suddenly threw his head back and laughed. That fake, too loud laugh that people use when they want everyone to pay attention to them. And it worked. The entire restaurant went quiet. "I've got a brilliant idea," Marcus announced, his voice echoing through the crown room. Everyone turned to look. A bit of entertainment for us all. Maya stood there, still holding her notepad, feeling a cold sense of dread creeping up her spine. She'd seen this before. Powerful men who got bored and decided to amuse themselves at someone else's expense. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick stack of bills. He made a big show of counting them, slapping each note down on Maya's tray. £20, 50, 100. The money kept coming until there were hundreds of pounds spread across her silver tray. £100,000, Marcus said slowly, making sure everyone heard. "I'll give you £100,000 if you can serve us in Mandarin Chinese." The restaurant went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Maya looked down at the money on her tray. £100,000. That was more than 2 years of her salary. That could pay off so much of her mother's debt. That could finally let her breathe. But she knew this wasn't really about money. This was about power. This was about Marcus Sterling showing these important investors that he was in control, that he could humiliate a simple waitress just because he could. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Marcus sneered. 100,000 not enough for you? He gestured toward the Chinese businessmen. "My friends here will judge whether your Chinese is any good. Though I'm betting you don't even know how to say thank you properly." One of the Chinese investors, an older man with kind eyes and glasses, looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, perhaps we should just—" No, Mr. Liu," Marcus interrupted. "This will be fun. Besides, I'm teaching everyone here an important lesson." He pointed at Maya with contempt. People like her always want more than they deserve. Always pretending to be something they're not. Maya's hands gripped the tray until her knuckles turned white. For just a moment, memories flooded back. 3 years ago, she had been Dr. Maya Chen. She had given lectures in Mandarin to packed auditoriums in Beijing. She had translated for the Chinese ambassador. She had written a whole book about Chinese language and culture. But now she was just a waitress in their eyes. Just another face in a uniform. "I accept," Maya said quietly. Marcus blinked. "What?" "I accept your challenge, Mr. Sterling." Her voice was stronger now. "I'll serve you in Mandarin. And when I'm finished, you'll pay me the £100,000 here, in front of everyone." For just a second, Marcus looked surprised. Then his cruel smile came back. "Oh, this is perfect. But let's make it more interesting, shall we?" He turned to the Chinese businessmen. "Gentlemen, you're about to see something hilarious. This woman actually thinks she can impress you." The older investor, Mr. Liu, shook his head. "This really isn't necessary, Marcus." But Marcus was on a roll now. "If she succeeds, which she won't, I'll pay the 100,000. But when she fails, she'll get down on her knees right here and apologize to every single person in this restaurant for wasting our time." Maya felt every eye in the restaurant on her. The other waiters had stopped moving. Customers at nearby tables pretended to look at their food, but they were all listening. "And what's more," Marcus continued, clearly enjoying himself, "she'll admit publicly that she's nothing but a desperate fraud who tried to make me look stupid." The second Chinese investor, a younger man named Mr. Wang, frowned deeply. "This is getting very uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Marcus slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses shake. "This is educational. You want to do business with me? You need to understand how I operate. I don't tolerate liars." Maya stood there, completely calm on the outside, even though her heart was pounding. 3 years of carrying trays and swallowing her pride had taught her something important. There's a time to walk away, and there's a time to stand your ground. This was time to stand. "I accept all your conditions," she said clearly. Marcus laughed in disbelief. "Even the kneeling and apologizing when you fail?" If I fail, yes. This is madness, the third investor, Mr. Chen muttered. But Marcus was too excited now. All right then. But wait, we need to make this even better. He snapped his fingers at another waiter. Bring me that special Chinese menu. The complicated one we use for our Beijing clients. The waiter hesitated. Sir, that menu has over 40 different dishes with very specific, technical descriptions. Perfect, Marcus crowed. If our language expert here really knows Chinese, a few technical details won't be a problem, right? What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that at that exact moment, Maya was remembering her 6 months as a visiting researcher at Beijing University. She was remembering her PhD thesis on Chinese culinary terminology. She was remembering the hundreds of hours she'd spent studying not just the language, but the culture, the history, the soul behind every word. As the menu was placed in front of her, as every person in that expensive restaurant leaned forward to watch what they thought would be a public destruction of a poor waitress, Maya took a deep breath. Some battles, she knew, were won long before the first word was spoken. And this battle? She'd already won it 3 years ago, in lecture halls and libraries and late nights studying in Beijing. Marcus Sterling just didn't know it yet. Maya opened the menu, and for the first time that evening, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Because right there, printed in beautiful Chinese characters, were dishes she knew as well as she knew her own name. She looked up at Marcus Sterling, at his smug face, at the cruel confidence in his eyes. Then she looked at the 3 Chinese investors, who sat there looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Before I begin, Maya said calmly, I'd like to confirm something. Do any of you gentlemen speak Mandarin fluently? Mr. Liu nodded slightly. I speak some, but I'm originally from Hong Kong, so Cantonese is my first language. Mr. Wang shook his head. Just basic phrases. But Mr. Chen, the quiet one who'd barely spoken, sat up straighter. I'm fluent, he said carefully. I was born in Taiwan but lived in Beijing for 15 years. I can evaluate proper Mandarin pronunciation. Marcus laughed nervously. Well, that's perfect. Not that it matters. She's going to fail spectacularly anyway. But something in his voice had changed. Just slightly. Because for the first time, he was seeing the absolute confidence in Maya's eyes. And it wasn't the false confidence of someone pretending. It was the real thing. Actually, Maya said, since we're talking about honesty and integrity, let me suggest something. If I can not only describe 5 dishes in perfect Mandarin, but also explain their history, their cultural significance, and their regional origins, all in Chinese, you double the amount to 200,000 pounds. The entire restaurant gasped. Marcus stared at her. 200,000? That's right. And if I fail, I'll not only apologize on my knees, I'll work here for free for 3 months. This is insane, Mr. Liu said, looking genuinely worried now. Miss, you don't have to do this. I want to, Maya said simply. Marcus should have been smart enough to back down. Any reasonable person would have seen the warning signs, the calm confidence, the raised stakes, the absolute certainty in her voice. But Marcus Sterling hadn't become rich by being smart or kind. He'd become rich by being ruthless and lucky. Fine, he said, extending his hand. 200,000 if you succeed. 3 months of free labor if you fail. Maya shook his hand firmly. Deal. And then, as the entire crown room held its breath, as wealthy people at nearby tables stopped pretending not to watch, as waiters froze in place, Maya began to speak. But it wasn't just speaking. It was like music. The Mandarin that flowed from her mouth was so perfect, so precise, so beautiful that Mr. Chen's eyes went wide immediately. He sat forward in his chair, completely transfixed. Good evening, gentlemen, Maya said in flawless Mandarin, her tones hitting every note perfectly. Allow me to present our special selections for this evening. She spoke like poetry, like water flowing, like someone who didn't just know the language but lived in it, breathed it, understood it in her soul. We begin with authentic Sichuan mapo tofu, she continued in Mandarin, prepared with 2-year-aged Pixin chili paste, following the traditional technique of Master Chen from Chengdu. This dish represents the balance of mala, the numbing sensation from Sichuan peppercorns combined with the heat of red chilies. The silky texture symbolizes the harmony between simplicity and complexity. Marcus looked confused. Wait, is she actually speaking Chinese? Real Chinese. Mr. Chen raised his hand, asking for silence. His face showed pure amazement. Maya kept going. This preparation method dates back to the Qing dynasty, when a pockmarked old woman, which is what Mapo means, created this recipe in her small restaurant. Today, it represents not just food, but the philosophy of Sichuan cuisine, that life should contain both comfort and challenge. My God, Mr. Chen whispered in English. She's not just speaking Mandarin. She's explaining cultural philosophy using vocabulary that most native speakers don't even know. Marcus's face had gone pale. This has to be some kind of trick. Maya turned to him and spoke in English for just a moment. Would you like me to continue in Beijing dialect, or perhaps Cantonese, Mr. Sterling? Which would you prefer? Different dialects? Marcus stammered. What are you talking about? And then Maya switched to Cantonese, a completely different Chinese language with different tones and sounds. In Hong Kong, we would present this same dish with different cultural references, emphasizing the traditions of old tea houses where scholars would gather. Mr. Liu, the Hong Kong businessman, literally gasped. That's perfect Cantonese. Real Hong Kong accent. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Who the hell are you? Maya paused. She looked at him with calm, devastating dignity. And then she said in English, clearly enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear. I am Dr. Maya Chen. I have a PhD in linguistics from Cambridge University. I spent 6 months as a visiting researcher at Beijing University. I wrote a book about Chinese culinary terminology published by Oxford University Press. I've translated for the United Nations. I've given lectures in Mandarin to audiences of hundreds of people. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a heartbeat. 3 years ago, Maya continued, her voice never wavering, my mother had a heart attack. The medical bills bankrupted me. I lost everything, my job, my home, my career. But I never lost my knowledge. I never lost my education. I never lost my dignity. Mr. Liu had tears in his eyes. You're a real doctor. A scholar. Yes, Maya said simply. I am. Marcus tried to speak, but only a strange choking sound came out. Shall I continue with the menu? Maya asked. Or have you heard enough? And in that moment, everyone in the crown room realized they weren't just watching a waitress speak Chinese. They were watching a brilliant woman remind the world who she really was. Marcus Sterling sat there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, no words coming out. The confident, cruel man from 5 minutes ago had completely disappeared. In his place sat someone who looked genuinely terrified. Please, Mr. Chen said quietly, continued Dr. Chen. We would be honored to hear more. And so Maya did. She described 4 more dishes, each one in perfect Mandarin, each explanation filled with historical details, cultural context, and technical knowledge that left the Chinese businessmen completely amazed. She talked about Peking duck and the specific way it had been prepared since 1864, using techniques passed down through generations. She explained soup dumplings and why they contain exactly 18 folds, because 18 is a lucky number in Chinese culture. She discussed regional differences in Chinese cooking with the expertise of someone who had spent years studying every detail. Mr. Chen translated bits and pieces for the others in English, though his translations couldn't capture the beauty of Maya's original words. She's explaining things that only master chefs know, he kept saying. This is extraordinary. This is the level of expertise you'd expect from a university professor, not. He stopped himself, looking embarrassed. Not from a waitress? Maya finished for him gently, still speaking English now. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? People see the uniform, and they think they know everything about the person wearing it. When she finally finished, she carefully placed the menu back on the table. The crown room remained completely silent. Every single person had been listening. Some had been secretly recording on their phones. Mr. Sterling, Maya said quietly, your 200,000 pounds, please. Marcus's hands shook as he reached for his wallet. His face had gone from pale to bright red. Sweat beaded on his forehead. One by one, with trembling fingers, he counted out the money and placed it on the table. But Mr. Chen held up his hand. Wait. He stood up, reached into his own jacket, and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Maya with both hands, the traditional Chinese way of showing respect. Dr. Chen, he said formally, my name is David Chen. I'm the CEO of Chen and Associates International. We handle cultural consulting for companies expanding into Asian markets. He paused, looking her directly in the eyes. We need someone with your expertise, your knowledge, your obvious intelligence and dignity. Maya took the card, too stunned to speak. Mr. Liu stood up too. Marcus, we're done here. The deal is off. What? Marcus finally found his voice. No, wait. You tried to publicly humiliate one of the most qualified people I've ever met, Mr. Liu said coldly. You judged her based on her job, her appearance, probably her race. You tried to destroy her dignity for entertainment. Mr. Wang nodded, also standing. A man who treats people this way is not someone we can trust with 200 million pounds. Please, Marcus begged, actually getting up from his chair. I didn't know. How could I have known? Exactly, Maya said, and her voice was like steel. You didn't know. But you didn't need to know my credentials to treat me with basic human respect. Did you, Mr. Sterling? You looked at me and you made assumptions. You saw a woman of Asian descent in a waitress uniform, and you decided I was uneducated, inferior, worth humiliating. Tears were actually forming in Marcus's eyes now. I made a mistake. You made a choice, Maya corrected him. You chose to be cruel. You chose to use your power to hurt someone you thought couldn't fight back. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. Mr. Chen stepped forward, addressing the entire restaurant now. Let me tell you all something. In Chinese culture, we have a saying, don't judge a person by their appearance, just as you can't measure the sea with a ladle. This woman has more knowledge in her little finger than most people acquire in a lifetime. He turned back to Maya. Dr. Chen, my offer is genuine. 150,000 pounds a year to start. Full benefits. Your own office. We need someone who understands not just language, but culture, respect, and dignity. Maya looked at the business card in her hand, then at the money on the table, then at Marcus Sterling's crumbling face. For a moment, just a moment, she felt something like pity for him. But only a moment. Mr. Sterling, she said quietly, you asked me to apologize if I failed. But I didn't fail. You did. So I think you owe someone an apology. Not to me, I don't need it. But to all the people over the years who you've looked down on, judged unfairly, or treated as less than human because they didn't meet your standards of success. The entire restaurant waited. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. Louder, Maya said. So everyone can hear. I'm sorry, Marcus shouted, and his voice cracked. I'm sorry for my prejudice, my cruelty, my arrogance. Maya picked up the 200,000 pounds, carefully folding it. Thank you. This will pay for my mother's medical care for quite a while. And Mr. Chen, she looked at the business card again, I would be honored to discuss your offer. As Maya walked away from that table, past the stunned faces of London's elite, past the other waiters who looked at her with new understanding, past the customers who would tell this story for years to come, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt like herself again. Not because she'd won money. Not because she'd gotten a job offer. But because she'd reminded herself, and everyone watching, that your worth isn't determined by your circumstances. It's determined by who you are when life strips everything else away. 6 months later, Maya sat in her office on the 42nd floor of a glass building in the heart of London's financial district. Through her window, she could see the Thames River winding through the city, the same city where she'd once felt invisible. But she wasn't invisible anymore. Dr. Maya Chen was now the Director of Cultural Relations at Chen and Associates International. She earned 150,000 pounds a year, more than she'd ever made as a professor. But more than the money, she had her dignity back. She had her purpose back. She had herself back. Her mother, Susan, was doing so much better now. They'd moved to a beautiful flat in a good neighborhood. Maya had hired a wonderful caregiver who came during the day when Maya was at work. Susan's physical therapy was progressing well. She could walk with a cane now. Her memory was improving. And every evening when Maya came home, her mother would smile and say, "How was your day, my brilliant daughter?" Those words meant more than any amount of money. Maya had also gone back to writing. She was working on a new book about how language reflects our assumptions about people. It was dedicated to everyone who has ever been underestimated. As for Marcus Sterling, well, the story of what happened that night had spread like wildfire. Someone had recorded the whole thing on their phone. The video went viral, 15 million views in just a few days. The headline read, "Wealthy developer tries to humiliate waitress, discovers she's a Cambridge PhD." The backlash was immediate and brutal. The 3 Chinese investors didn't just cancel their deal. They told everyone in their business network what had happened. Other investors pulled out. Banks started asking questions about his loans. His company collapsed within months. His wife left him, taking half of what remained. His adult children stopped speaking to him, embarrassed by his behavior. Marcus lost his luxury home, his expensive cars, his reputation. Everything. Maya heard he was working in sales now, at a small company in the suburbs. She felt no joy about his downfall, but she felt no guilt either. Actions have consequences. Cruelty has costs. The real change, though, was bigger than just one cruel man getting what he deserved. Maya's story had touched something deep in people. She received thousands of messages from people around the world. People who'd been underestimated, looked down on, judged unfairly. A janitor who was secretly writing a novel. A taxi driver who had been a surgeon in his home country. A retail worker who spoke 5 languages. A cleaner who had 2 degrees but couldn't find work in her field. All of them said the same thing. Thank you for reminding us that our circumstances don't define our worth. Maya started giving talks again, but different kinds of talks than before. She spoke at community centers, at job training programs, at shelters. She talked about resilience, about dignity, about never forgetting who you are even when the world tries to make you forget. Listen to me, she would say, looking out at audiences full of people who were struggling, fighting, barely surviving. I know what it's like to lose everything. I know what it's like to feel invisible. I know what it's like when people look at you and see nothing but your current situation. She would pause, making eye contact with as many people as she could. But here's what I learned. You are not your job. You are not your bank account. You are not what other people think about you. You are the sum of your knowledge, your experiences, your kindness, your strength. And nobody can take that away from you unless you let them. People would cry. They would nod. They would come up to her afterward and thank her for giving them hope. One evening, Maya returned to the Crown Room. Not as a waitress this time, but as a guest. Mr. Chun had invited her to a business dinner with new clients. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. Dr. Chun, he said with genuine warmth. Welcome back. As she walked through the restaurant, several of the waiters caught her eye and smiled. They knew her story. She'd made a point of visiting them, of telling them that their work had dignity, that serving people was honorable, that they were not less than anyone they served. Maya sat down at her table and looked around the elegant room. 6 months ago, she'd stood here with a tray in her hands, being humiliated by a cruel man who thought money made him superior. Now she sat here as an honored guest, a respected professional, a woman who had clawed her way back from the bottom. But the truth was, she'd never really been at the bottom. Even in her darkest moments, working 2 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, barely surviving, she'd never lost the most important things. Her education, her intelligence, her dignity, her love for her mother, her strength. Those things, she realized, had always been there. They'd just been hidden under the weight of circumstances, like a diamond buried in mud. The mud didn't change the diamond. It just made it harder to see. As dinner was served and business was discussed, Maya found herself thinking about that night 6 months ago. She thought about the fear she'd felt, the anger, the moment when she had to decide whether to walk away or stand her ground. She'd chosen to stand. And that choice had changed everything. Later, when she got home, her mother was still awake, reading in her favorite chair. "How was dinner, sweetheart?" Susan asked. "It was good, Mum," Maya said, kissing her mother's forehead. "Really good." "I'm so proud of you," Susan said, taking Maya's hand. "Not because of your fancy job or your success. I was always proud of you, even when times were hard. I'm proud because you never lost yourself. You never became bitter. You never let cruelty make you cruel." Maya felt tears sting her eyes. "I learned that from you, Mum. You taught me to stand tall no matter what." That night, before bed, Maya stood at her window looking out at the lights of London. Somewhere out there were people working night shifts, struggling to make ends meet, being looked down on by others who thought they were better. She hoped her story would reach them. She hoped they would remember that circumstances are temporary, but character is forever. That dignity isn't given by others, it comes from within. That being underestimated can be your greatest advantage, because people never see you coming. And she hoped they would remember this simple truth. You are not what has happened to you. You are what you choose to become despite what has happened to you. Maya smiled, turned off the light, and went to bed. Tomorrow was a new day, full of possibilities. And she was ready for all of them. The end. If this story touched your heart, remember, your worth is not determined by your circumstances. You are brilliant, you are valuable, and you are enough, exactly as you are, right now. Never let anyone make you forget that.